While we're waiting for that, I'll go ahead and talk about these 12.1 inserts. So if we go into libraries and inserts, you'll see in the insert library, we've shared some of these things out recently. So you'll see that there's now the bin options for the Westco Pool Boy and also the Hafele Halo Euro Cargo range. So they're brand new options that we've gone through and sort of created some nice models for. And there's a nice range there. As you can see in the Antaro range, there's in the drop-down menu, you'll see the Blum Antaro, Westco Pool Boy range, the Legra box and Marivo box options. So quite a few new bin options there. And we've tried to list it out based on the cabinet size. So you'll see 300s, 400s, 450. That's referring to the overall cabinet size that you would need to accommodate that bin. And then the capacity of the bin written at the end of it there. So you'll see the one I've got highlighted here is the 2 by 26 litre buckets, and then you've got the 2 by 32 litre buckets as well in the 450 range. So I guess within those options, you'll be able to accommodate different choices. So very easy to use. If I go ahead and look at this this cabinet here, I've just got the cabinet set to a hinged on the bottom. And then I've got that set to a door. I've just gone into the adjust and deleted my hinges. So that way I've got a handle at the top there and nothing at the moment inside the box. And what we want to do there is go ahead and go to the interior. And now we can go to the inserts by clicking on the opening and clicking on inserts. And you'll see then you've got the bins Westco Pool Boy range. And then you can go ahead and drag out the appropriate ones. I've got a 450 wide cabinet. So I'm going to go ahead and grab, say, the 450 to 32 litre buckets and drag and drop that in. Now, that's pretty much all you would need to do at that point. What you can see here, and if we look at this in the high detail mode, you'll see we've got the front bracket drilling coming through onto the back of the door face and also the side bracket options onto the side of the cabinets. So both of those options would come through automatically. Now, if you do want to sort of lift your bin up higher to sit higher in the cabinet and have a bigger space underneath, the best way to do that would be by using an insert separator. So I'll clear this out and we'll go ahead and split the product and we'll change that type to a separator. I can click then and nominate the amount of space I want underneath the separator. So you can nominate what you want that to be. Say I wanted that to be 50 millimeters, for example. I can click then, and I've got two separate insert areas that I can utilize then. So in this top section here, I could go ahead and drag that product out. And then what you'll see is the drilling and everything's moved up that extra 50 mil space that I've accommodated. So, you know, if I wanted to bump that up, you can see I've still got 67 mil top clearance above the bin drawer there. So I'm going to go ahead and still move that to 100, and I would still have, 17 mil of clearance above that then. And that's about as high as I probably want to set that option. But that does give you those choices to be able to run through and set that to what you're after. Okay, so I can see Mark's asked a question here about is there a way to add clearance to corner cabinets, both right, left walls, similar to the clearance for blind corners? So you could, I guess there's no way of sort of nominating separate clearances if that's sort of what you're asking. So if we go ahead and look at a corner cabinet here and just drag and drop a corner cabinet into the section here. At the moment, as you can see, the one clearance option, if we go into the parameters, so we've got the unfinished back recess, that there would be to, if I was to zero that out, you would see that would zero out on both sides. So it's not, one or the other, it is just both sides. In the situation, I guess, where this maybe was an invisible wall, because maybe that's going to be a return, breakfast bar or something like that, where you're going to see the other side of that. It may be a bar panel or something like that. I can understand where you're trying to achieve there. So what you could probably do in that situation, if I go ahead and make this 16.5, just to bring that clearance back, you could probably change what the part type is there. So if it is a back, then we are going to get that, 16 mil scribe on that back. But if we change the part type, and let's just say we make that, for example, an end, and I click OK, that's kind of one way you could roughly achieve it, because now that's classified as an end of a cabinet, not the back. So, that would be one option. You would just need to, accommodate sort of how you would want that join to work then, because being an end, it's going to go all the way back to the wall. But you could click on the section there and go adjust, and then, you could take off a right edge adjustment like 16.5 mil or something like that to be able to pull that back in line with the other back. and then you'd probably need to do the similar sort of thing at this end of the product as well. So we had a look in the 3D view there. At the moment, they're both overlapping, thinking that you probably want to, miter two ends together. But in this situation, same deal. You could click on this one, adjust, and then you could take your material thickness away from that edge as well. So then looking at that, you sort of come up with the right option. You've got the two ends there meeting in the back there, and that's giving you the adjustment on one side where you're still got the clearance there, but not on the breakfast bar side. Hopefully that's kind of what you're after. Hopefully I've sort of answered that one clearly, but yeah, just drop me a comment if you want to sort of clarify any of that a little bit further. So coming back to some of the other changes in 12.1, if we jump into libraries, and we're going to go down and take a look at the fasteners. So I'm going to go into the hardware library and into fasteners. One of the changes that I wanted to mention was that in the CADmate screws, one thing that you could do an update on your side would just be the drilling depth, what it's linked to. Previously, this was linked to an unfinished end. So right now you can change that to part TH. So the value part TH will look up the current part thickness. So, if you do happen to change your end thicknesses, from, say 16 mil on one end and, something on another end, what I'm trying to point out here is I click on this one and maybe make this a finished end. And let's say then I go to my finished end and, I've nominated a different material thickness. So that right now that's on 18 mil. What we'll notice in prior to 12.1 was that your screw holes were still based on the unfinished end. So they were not going deep enough on the finished end in the different material. Whereas now with that new formula, it'll reference whatever the current part is, not just a particular part type, which is really useful. That's a really useful one as well, just in general, if you were trying to add a cutout to something, like if I was to add a cutout to the bottom of this cabinet and I was to go into my edit operations, and let's just say I go ahead and I'll do a perimeter toolpath and I might just offset that in, let's say, minus 50 mil all the way around. Now, if I was wanting that to cut through, what I could do there in the depth, I could just go ahead and nominate the calculator and just type part TH. So as soon as you type part TH and you press test, it's now referring to the thickness of that part. So that part in there, it's 16.5 mil thick at the moment based on my material. But I can go into edit there and I could change that material to something else. So for example, I'm just going to pick a 19 mil material. And when I come back in here and I go back to my edit operation, what you'll see is that's updated to 19 based on that current part thickness. So pretty useful to know that you can go ahead and just nominate really easily now part TH, just like part L for part length and part W for part width. Part TH would be the part thickness. So really easy to look that value up now in a formula. While we're talking about adding operations, the question has come up recently. One of the people asked a question there on Facebook about anchoring and how the anchoring system works. So just wanted to point that out. Like at the moment, let's just, I'll delete this one and we'll add another one in. We'll just do a closed toolpath. Now, at the moment, this point here, it's a certain distance away from the left, right? If I was just to say, I'm going to make that 100 mil, and I'm going to click on this one and make that also 100 millimeters, just for nice round numbers. And I'll do the same here. Let's say I go 100 millimeters from the front, and I'll do the same here, 100 millimeters from that side. Now, if you're trying to keep these particular points exactly 100 millimeters away from this edge, you want to make sure you change your anchoring value, because if you leave it on the middle, what happens is it's scaling as the part grows in size or shrinks in size. It's going to scale from the middle of the product because that's what the anchor is told to do at the moment. So what I'll probably do there is just anchor that to the bottom left-hand corner. So now when I change the size of my product, that's always going to stay the same distance from that bottom left-hand corner. So we're not locking that in, but we're just saying like whatever that current X and Y value is, I want it to remain that same distance off this left. Same deal on the right. Like, at the moment, my part size here is 765.5. So, if I went 6, 65.5, then I'm obviously 100 mil in from that other corner. And same deal, I could lock that to then now the right bottom corner. And then same deal up here, you could type in that same value. So you don't necessarily need to put in formulas when plotting points out. You could just, sorry, that's the wrong side. So we'll go 43.5 that way, and what was that value? 665.5 that way, and then your smart snapping will help you pick up the other point. Of course, if you were just trying to get to 100 mil all the way around, the way I sort of showed you first would be the better way to go about it. You just go a perimeter toolpath and then just go offset and just go minus 100. And that's a real quick way of just getting, 100 millimeters all the way around on that. And obviously then I could go through and do my anchoring. So I could anchor that to the top right, anchor that to the bottom right, anchor this one to the bottom left, and now anchor this one to the top left. And now just to show you that, if we get out of there and let's go ahead and make this product bigger and wider and deeper, come back in and we'll look at that part. We're going to edit and edit operations, and we're still now locked in there nicely at 100 mil all the way around without putting any formulas in. So anchoring is just a real simple way of saying I want to keep whatever that fixed value is from that point. If you want to keep, if you wanted to sort of keep it all anchored to the middle, what happens there is that now it's going to keep that fixed distance off the middle. And then as you grow, as the cabinet grows, the edges is going to be what changes there. So just to show you that difference again, if I now go and make that wider and deeper again, and we go back into that bottom, we're going to edit and edit operations. So what's changing there now is it's going to be keeping, you can see these values, they're not 100 mil anymore, they've gone to 122. So it's sort of scaling now with the product. It's not that it's keeping a fixed value off the middle of the product, it's now scaling in relation to it. So as you grow, if you were to grow that by 100%, your scale would be 100%. If you were to grow it by 50%, that would scale according to the factor of, what percentage that was to begin with. So much easier to understand the anchoring when you start pointing things to the opposite corners rather than off the middle. But if you want it to scale, proportionately as the product grows or shrinks, then anchoring to the middle is fine. But if you wanted to keep fixed values, anchoring to either point is a good one to know. And another point on the toolpaths there, that when you do assign a tool, if you do assign, say, like a 10 millimeter compression cutter, for example, that tool is actually running around the middle of that line, which means, you've got to accommodate for the tool radius, which would be on the outside of that line. So a better way, if you're trying to do a cutout, rather than just assigning the tool itself, would be to go into your panel tool groups and have a panel tool group that it's assigned to put an internal cutout. So, you could have one, we've got one in our standard library there, internal toolpath cutout, that nominates that standard 3-wing compression cutter, the 10 mil 3-wing compression cutter. And then you don't even need to nominate a depth, because that particular toolpath has the tool going through the material. So then you can see that's going straight through without even needing to nominate a depth. So a whole bunch of different information there that you can sort of utilize. But I think, utilizing your understanding the relationship of sort of tools and how they apply to a line, and the tool paths and how they apply to a line, definitely something worth investigating and understanding, because you'll definitely find that super useful. Let's see, some of the other questions that came through on Facebook there was, Brock was asking about how to do corner pantries, the corner 45 pantries, and set the top and bottom to run over the product. So I'll try and explain that one. At least my understanding of what he was asking. He was asking for L-shaped shelves too. So in our standard library under tall 45 corner cabinets, we do have a tall 45 face L-shaped shelf option. If we go into this product, by default, the way this one is out of the box is it's got the ends, over the top, and I can avoid at the back there, and the door is sitting sort of then between those. Now the door also, it probably has some adjustment values on there, so you can see we've taken 12 mil away and we've inset the door 11.7 mil. So if you're going to change all this, some of those values are going to change, but and we do have the shelf shaped as well. So within that L shape that you're after. So I think what you were asking there, Brock, is that you wanted the top and the bottom of the cabinet to run over the ends and over the back. So I'll just kind of explain how that change would look and how that would work. We go into the parameters here. The first thing you want to do is jump into the select a new parameter, and let's go down to the ends value. And there's an option here that says long bottom at unfinished end. So I'm going to click OK on that one. I'm going to change that to yes. And I'm going to go back in there and I'm going to go to the long top at unfinished end. I'm going to change that one to yes. And I'm also going to then go into the backs area. And what we're going to look at is the relationship between the back and the top of the cabinet. And we're probably going to change that to case depth, and the relationship between the back and the bottom of the cabinet. And we're probably going to change that to case depth as well. I'd probably take away my recesses at this point. I mean, you might want to leave them, up to you. But if we have a look at that now, what we've done there is we've extended the top over the ends and the top over the back to get that full top as you kind of wanted. Now, a couple of things we'll need to do, because this was a modified part, and as you can see, this relationship here is what I'm sort of looking at fixing now. The reason why that's happening is the top and the bottom have got custom shapes on there. So they're already kind of overruled and shaped to the way we wanted it to work based on our standard construction. So we're just going to press rebuild on those two parts. So just going to click on the top and press rebuild, click on the bottom and press rebuild. And now when we go ahead and look at the 3D option here, you can see we've still got that top, the door that's inset at the moment. We can go ahead and click on the face and adjustments, and let's take that inset away. So that way it sits forward. So that way it sits, in the correct location there. And then that's really what you're after. You're talking about putting your top all the way over your ends and your back, and then, having your door in front of that. Of course, you could probably then go in and go to the shape, and, maybe you want to make that an applied door. Maybe this has got end panels on both sides, so we can just do an applied door on both ends of that there. And then when we have a look at this, we can see we're getting that applied door option there. And of course, that might change things as well, depending on how you want to build this as well. But yeah, there's a couple of different options. I didn't mean to do that as a back. That should have just been an applied door. And that would get me a better result there with my shape of my cabinet. And then if we look at this from a top view looking down, you'd probably want to make some adjustments to the doors and these overhangs, depending on how you wanted this to work. Some guys cut that back on an angle. Some guys would bring this out further and then drop your door back in, so your door kind of meets at that point there. And there's easy ways to do that. Like, you can click on that end and then go adjust, and then you've got like left and right edge adjustments there. So I could go to this left edge and let's say add 7 mil or something there. What's going to happen there is that's going to shoot that end forward, and then I'll just take a bit more off that door to pull that back. So I'm trying to sort of get those points to line up to a certain extent. So, you can either click on the section of the face and adjust it here in the left and right, or you could go to the face there, click on it and go to adjust, and then continue to adjust the amounts here, So if I wanted to take that, maybe I'd go to like -17 or something like that, left and right. And then, that's going to get me pretty close. I'd probably go a little bit more, maybe -19, and maybe that that end can come out to 8 mil instead of 7. So you can play with your adjustments to, get that looking the way you want it. So it's pretty straightforward. It's just a case of, I guess, building that the way that you're after. But I'll just click on and go through and put all those adjustments on there. And then once you've got that saved, you can put that back into your library. That's fully parametric, and then you've got a nice sort of gap between the parts there. And then, you got your end panels on both sides. So that's really sort of probably what you're asking there. The top is over the ends of the cabinet. It's just that we've got an applied end on that now, which is totally optional. You could go back to that being just a standard side if you'd like, but hopefully that sort of covers and explains what you're after there. The ends or the shelves have been shaped. So if you go to the shelf itself and go to edit and then edit shape, these have a custom shape on there, and they've got some parameters there that are referring to the overall sort of side of the cabinet, and then taking away the shelf recesses and things like that. So if we look at the parameter value, if you wanted to change the depth of either of those ends, it would be by changing, the left or right end depth there. But as you sort of grow that cabinet, then, your shelf will change with it. So, say I went to, let's go 1 meter this way and 1 meter this way. And I go back in and look at this product in 3D, you can see all my shelves have grown appropriately with the cabinet. So, and then all those changes that I just made for the doors and everything have also stretched as well. So hopefully that answers your questions there. We did have a question there from Matt in the States, who was asking about how to update to V version, like from version 10 to version 12.1. You can get your update straight from the Mozaik forum. You can log into the forum just by going to your help menu there and then going down to Mozaik forum. You can register for the forum and go ahead and download from the latest software updates area there. No, you don't have to update all the different versions in between. The latest updated version for 12.1 will include all previous updates as well. So it's nice and easy. All you really need to do there, I'd just suggest going to your C drive and backing up your Mozaik folder and just creating a full backup of that. So just right click on that and go copy and do a paste of a full Mozaik backup folder, and maybe even just call that V10 the backup version, and then you can go ahead and save all of that. You can also do it through Mozaik too. So you can go to Tools and you can click on Backup Restore. You can choose a backup location. You can click create a full Mozaik backup. That's another great way of doing it too. So it'd be a nice option as well for you to be able to just do that and then download the latest 12.1 update and run that. Obviously close Mozaik, but it's fairly pain-free and easy, so it's not a difficult thing to do as long as you create your backup so you can restore if you need to. But you should be pretty safe to jump in from version 10 straight to version 12.1. Noelle's asking about, do you know the Euro cargos, the same one here in the States? I'm not 100% sure if they're the exact same. I believe they are, because I think all of that Halo range comes out of Europe anyway. So they probably supply the same. You could check them out in the options that we've supplied. You will have you'll be able to sort of compare. So we go into inserts and then come down to the bins Halo Euro. So Hafele, depending on how you want to pronounce it, is just the local supplier here. That might not be the case in the States. They might come from a different provider, but the products themselves should be fairly universal. From what I've seen, it was pretty hard to obtain the specs for these ones, but we worked through and found them. We're able to sort of get a model, a SketchUp model, and then dimension off that SketchUp model. Thanks to some of the helpful people at Hafele. So, Eric's sharing the specs there that we've utilized too. So you can go ahead and have a look at them. Yeah, cool. So Noah, you're saying that Hafele are the provider over there as well. Cool. I'll get Eric to also share maybe the SketchUp model that we dimensioned these on too, which would be nice. So that way you can compare the two. We've also got some screenshots in that folder, Eric, too, that you can share in the chat as well, that have just the dimensioned versions on them. So that way you can compare. But the model number itself there should be fairly universal between everywhere in the world. Lisa's asking about the spice pullout for 150 wide cabinet. We don't have one at the moment, but happy to add them in. We're actually been in the process of adding in. The hardest thing with any of these things is sourcing the actual models themselves and getting the specs. So, Lisa, if there's one like that you're after in particular, just send us through a note to say what the actual particular one is. If you've got a link to it, that would be awesome. And we can try and get in touch with Hafele and ask about ask if they can provide us with a 3D model of that, because if they can, it makes it easy for us to add that in. We've been working with various companies to try and do that sort of thing too. And I'll just give you a bit of a preview here. Hot off the press today, Jason's been working on adding in the Nova pullout range. So the Pika system, or PEKA, also popular throughout Europe as well. So it's another great one there. We can go to clear there. And same deal, I would just set that to a door and, hinged bottom, and remove my hinges just to set that door up. And then when we go to inserts, we'll be releasing these as well. That's on our list to do today. So you'll see in the list here, there's a Nova Pika pullouts, and there's a 150, which is the 150 spice rack, I guess, from Nova. This Snello Libel range, however you want to say it. There's a 150, 200, and a 300. So I'll go ahead and grab the 300 and drop that in. Pretty easy, drag and drop. That's going to go ahead and put that rack in, and you're going to get your front drilling and everything. So if I add that to high detail, you'll see that we've got the front drilling coming through for those brackets and the side drilling for that to hinge off as well. So that's going to be really useful. So it's much easier now in 12.1 that we can add the front drilling. It makes this really possible for us to be able to share so many of these things. So yeah, definitely, Noel, definitely plan on switching the Eventos and Le Mans to insert libraries as well. Nova has also been kind enough to share the Magic Corner as well, which is another popular one. So we'll be adding the Magic Corner as well in as a insert option too. So there's a huge list that especially bin drawers. There's crazy amount of bin waste systems out there, and we've been trying to source everything. So if anyone has any suggestions on the things they want added, we'll just keep working through them and sharing them as we create them. So yeah, definitely the Eventos systems. And speaking to the Bloom rep recently, he has been advising me that they're recently going to be changing to there's some new Eventos systems coming out too, ones that are, I think, fully routed and embedded into the side of the product as well. So they don't take up any cabinet space. So yeah, there's some nice new stuff from Bloom coming there, and we'll be on the front foot at adding that stuff in for sure. Let's see. Michael's asking, is there a way to bore holes in the cabinet back butt join method so they are evenly spaced? Add in, remove when stretched, reduced in size. Let's see. So you're talking about are you talking about screwing the back into these holes here? You're talking about sort of the holes along the back edge of the product here. Because if I was to go ahead and back into base, okay, I know what you're talking about now. So let's just drag out a standard base cabinet, and I'll make this wider. So I think what you're saying there is that as we get wider, we're still remaining on 3 holes as opposed to going to add multiple holes at that point. Yep, cool. So, at some point, really, I guess, you're probably going to want to go from, if we just make that a bit smaller, at some point, 3 holes is going to be suitable. And then at some point, you're probably going to want to change to 4. And at some point, wanting to change to 5. Easier to add in the going from 3 straight to 5 than it is going from 3 to 4 and then 5. But I'll explain why. If we jump into the fasteners area, so say we go into libraries and hardware, and then we'll go into the joint templates, and we'll look at the CADmate screws method. So the option that we're looking at there is a joint from the bottom to the back. And the factor that we have to kind of work around at the moment is that you've got options for 4 locations by default, right? So location 1 is just set 50 millimeters in from the left edge. Location number 2 is set 50 millimeters in from the right edge. And then location number 3 is set in the center. And that's kind of just out of the box how it works, right? Location number 4 at the moment is disabled, right? If we wanted to go from kind of 3 to 4, what we would need to do would be to create a couple of rules. And I could say, look, I could untick don't use. The first thing I would have to say is how long is the joint edge when this happens? So, let's say anything over 800, I want to enable this 4th hole. And then the next question is, where do I want it to be? Is it a set distance from the center? Is it a set distance from the right edge? Is it a set distance from the left edge? Depending on how we're going to make that work, right? So we could say a set distance from the right edge, and I could go into the formula here and I could put a formula on this. Now, the complication around this becomes whether we're referring to the length or the width of the part and which part that is coming from, right? So just to show you, let's just put part length to start with. So let's say I was to go in part length and divide that by 4 because I want to be a quarter of the way in, right? At the moment, you're not going to see any result here because we don't actually have a part in here to refer that to. But let's say part length divided by 4 and I'm a quarter of the way in. I'd probably also want to then add in that 50 mil as well. So, whatever that value is, and then I want to go another 50 mil. So that way I'm accommodating, for the first screw hole as well. Now let's just press OK there, and we'll save that and look at the change. So I open up this product. It's over 800 long, so we're going to get that extra hole. So we can see that's the one appearing here. I'd probably also want to change that to, rather than a quarter, I might want to increase that. Brock's asking, are you going to share this? Yep, definitely, man. We'll share this out as we go. Afterwards, we'll share the recording, no problems. So what I'm referring to there is that's the first hole, right, that I've just added in. And we go back in here and we take a look at that formula again. And I look at the joint template and we jump into the CAD screws one and we go back to that option and we'll go to the bottom to the back and we'll look at the fourth hole. We'll go into the formula. Let's see if I change from part length to part width. Let's see that move. All right, so as we open this back up and go back to 3D, that now looks like it's a quarter of the way in, right? So we're referring to the width of the back as the, moving across this way and the length of the back coming up this way. So I guess the first thing you need to know is what part it's taking that option from, right? Because it's not coming from the bottom, because the bottom is the part that you would maybe think that it's coming from being referring that, but it's picking that up from the back. So when we're saying part width, it's the part that it starts as. So, it's a back and I'm looking at the joint between the bottom and the back. First thing I always do before you do too much is just dive in and maybe just do one and check where it's referring to. So that way you can start on the right foot. Otherwise you sort of chase your tail the whole way through. So now that I've got that right, and I go to libraries and hardware and back into the joint templates, and let's go to the CAD screws one again, and we'll go back into the back to bottom and we'll look at the third hole. Now the third hole is just at the moment fixed from the center, right? I'm going to change that to from left, and the distance, like maybe I always want that to be on, right? So I don't need to say, joint lengths greater than, or maybe, at a certain length, maybe like 200 long for that joint, I probably want it to go to 2 screws, So at some point I might want to turn that off, which you can easily do. But above that, I'm going to say by default, if I'm looking at making this in the center as a default rule, I'd say that same part width divided by 2. It's not case sensitive, but I just in the habit of typing that in capitals in that format. But again, doesn't have to be. So first of all, I've got that. I'm putting it in the middle by default. And then I'm going to say, if the part width was greater than or equal to a certain size, and I'm going to go back to that 800 value that I said before, then rather than it be in the middle, I want it to be the part width divided by 4 plus that 50 millimeters that I wanted to bump it in to allow for the other screw. So then we'll get out of there and okay, and we'll jump into this one and we'll go to the view option. So now what you'll see here is that I've got my screws in from the edge. Probably need to adjust that a little bit further actually to get that exactly at a quarter. But what you'll see, as I reduce this in size, at some point there in between 800, it's going to drop back to just the one hole in the middle. And then as I go over in size, I'm going to get my 4 holes. And, if I've reduced it right down to under 200, I'm going to get the extra one, and then maybe you want to put another hole in the middle there. And then that's where you'd need to introduce another template there. So if we went into the hardware library, to go above 4, it's just extra templates. So we go into joint templates here, and I was to, look at this CAD screws one, maybe, you could do a save as, but it's probably easier just to add a brand new one. But if I do a save as there, and let's just call this back holes, and we will go ahead and, maybe turn all the other ones off. So I'd probably go through, just so you're not doubling up with all of them, I'd go through and just disable all the other ones. So I'm not going to waste too much time doing that now, but you can see how I'd go through and just disable everything that I don't want this to be. And then on this particular option, now my location 1 is going to be the 5th hole, and then location 2 would be the 6th, location 3 would be the 7th, and location 4 would be the 8th. Same deal, I'd need to put rules as to when they turn on and where I want them to be placed. So, just to show you let's just do the first one. Location 1, that might just be in the center, and that might only come on again when above 800 or something, maybe even more. Maybe it would go to a meter when you want that to turn on. Again, you can create that rule, and I will go ahead and say in my job parameters under the fasteners, I'm going to go ahead and add that extra option on. And then we'll go into this one here and take a look, and you'll see that we've got that extra hole. So definitely achievable, but a bit of mucking around to get it to do what you might want it to do when you start looking at, adding second, third, fourth, fifth holes as you stretch the cabinet wider. Cool. You can also base that on, if you looked at our original ones, and if you don't have a copy of these, let us know, because the way we had originally had these set up was the 1 to 4 and 5 to 8 methods as well. So if you were to go from cabinet screws to the 1 to 4 and 5 to 8 method, that should automatically be kind of set up to do that for you. So the complication here is this is the reason why we moved away from it actually, is again, depending on whether we're picking up part length and part width based on a few factors, whether you've got internal or external backs, and there's other things that come into play. So, depending on your construction method, that might need to be the internal option for those particular ones. And then that way you're going to get a different result again on the placement of those. So yeah, there's various reasons why we kind of sort of avoided that. I think, what I'd probably like to see would be an option for us to just refer to joint length, and maybe just expanding, having Mozaik expand that option out to 6 or 7 or maybe 8 or so screws that we could do per edge. That way it's a lot simpler. But at the moment, yeah, certainly achievable, but yeah, a bit of work and a bit of mucking around. Let's see. So someone there asked about, can you set up Peanut, the fittings connection? So same kind of concept, really. You're in the hardware joint fasteners area, and the if Peanut options are listed in there already. So you can go ahead. I'm not overly familiar with that particular brand, but they already are sort of set up with the default settings, so you could tweak them. These do require obviously a route, so that would be a route path that has already been created. So you could definitely go through and try and utilize that. If there's something specific that you need to change there, maybe just let us know. What it is particular that you need to adjust, but you can see that you've got the adjustments there all built in. And then for them, it's really just a case of you nominating where you want them to be. So if we had a look at like the connection between a bottom and a end, it's set by default 1 inch in from the front edge, and then location 2 is 1 inch in from the rear edge, and then location 3 is in the middle over a certain size. And if I flick to inches, it's over 14 inches, it's going to turn on. So for us to utilize those, it would just be a case of nominating the appropriate one. So you can see that you've got 2 different options. So you've got a few different options there. So it would be going through and turning on the options and nominating those on. So that way you could utilize those, and you can see then if I was to open up this product, I've got those options there, and I can enable my high detail view there just to get a clearer shot of that. So you've got the hole with the route going through there. So that should be that should work pretty well out of the box. Just a case of whether or not you wanted to adjust the locations of those, which you can do in the hardware settings. So hopefully that clears up your question there. Let's see, has anyone else got any questions or things that they'd like me to run through? Brock, let's see. So how to add multiple runs on a closed toolpath in the operations tab if you're doing a range hood cutout. So depends on the cutout itself. So yeah, it's a decent question, because it depends on how you've set up the route. So like, let's just go into this bottom and we'll go into edit operations, and we'll add a closed toolpath, right? Now, if you've nominated a tool, so if you said, again, we spoke about this earlier, but if I just enter part TH there, that's going to refer to the part thickness. If I was to nominate just a tool, and just to say I was to do this 10 mil 3-wing cutter, right? If I nominate just the tool itself, then what comes into play is the values for that tool. So let's go into the optimizer. I'll just change my sharing settings here so you guys can see that. So in the optimizer, if I go into libraries and CNC tool in, and I click on that tool, you do have a pass depth value. So if you wanted to do that cutout in increments of 5 millimeters, you could nominate 5 millimeters as your pass depth. Keep in mind, if you're using that tool for other things like cutting the parts out, that same pass depth is going to apply everywhere where you're using that tool, regardless of if it's a cutout or it's an operation like you're talking about here. So that's one way that you could approach it, right? You could nominate your pass depth, and then that will automatically do it in increments of 5 until it gets down to the appropriate thickness. So talking about a 16.5 mil, it would go 5, 10, 15, and then 16.8 in this case, because I've got a 0.3 value to my through cut. However, if I didn't want to affect my standard cutout and I wanted this, to be 20 mil or something like that, whatever I wanted it set to, then I would do it instead as a panel tool group. So if I looked at the internal cutout option, and this is probably what's by default assigned to your range hood cutout, that way you don't have to factor in the tool radius into anything. If we come down to the depth value here, right? At the moment, this is a through cut. So this is just straight away going to go all the way through. Now, if you wanted to do that in increments, what you could do here is just add another tool to this one. And I'd probably list that one first, and I'd do the same thing. I'd have the same offset, or maybe you want to go a touch oversized, on the first one. Maybe I'll go 5.5. And then the depth would be, instead of a through cut, maybe I want to go down 10 mil deep on the first one, or 15 mil deep. Again, I can nominate what I want that to be. But what I'm basically doing there is nominating that, this particular tool is going to be first. So the order of the tool is important. That one's going to be first. It's going down 15 mil deep at an offset of 5.5 millimeters. And then we're coming in with the cutout tool. So, just by adding those extra tools in, and you can have as many tools in that tool group as you like, then you could achieve it. So, that would be probably the easiest way to go about it, I would say. Because then in your tool path here, all you would need to do would be to nominate that particular panel tool group, and then the rest of it would be automatic from there. So you just go into your panel tool group and nominate that internal cutout option. And then now that's got the 2 tools as part of that panel tool group. And then that way, anywhere you're assigned, that's going to do that automatically without you thinking about it. Michael saying, I'm still in version 10, but the range hood cabinet parameters doesn't have an option for cutout from edge, whereas under panels it has been. Has this been updated on version 12? Pretty sure Jason has gone through and updated that. Yeah, Jason's just clarifying that now. We updated that in version 11 and 12. So if I was just to go into products there and drag out a range hood cabinet, we have expanded that range hood cabinet range as well in version 12 too. So, you've got your standard range hood cabinet. And if I was just to show you, that's the sort of the one you've probably been using. You got the option to shift those cutouts. We've also made the duct box auto center unless you specify otherwise. But we've also added in ones here that have a division. So there's ones that have divisions where the hinges can slide inside that division. And then there's ones with cutouts as well. So just to show you that one maybe a little bit clearer, if I open that up. So what I'm talking about here is we've got a front panel over this and then a cutout around the hinge with parameters where you can control the size of that cutout and then the location of the cutout. So definitely worth updating to the latest version 12 library. A lot of things to take advantage of there, as I mentioned. So yeah, and then we've got a different range for the pullouts as well. So same kind of thing, the pullout, but with a duct box too. So a few options in there to take advantage of for sure. Let's see. So some of the other questions that came through, we had Matt also asking about how to do a refacing job. Probably like what we try to do with the version 12 library of Mozaik as well is add in some refacing options. So I would do this in the order entry. And if I come down to the parts and accessories and order entry parts, and we come down, we've got door components there, and we have added in like the Bloom door reface left and reface right, as well as the head hitch option, and then a drawer front reface. So the way these are designed to work, that you can drag and drop, you're assuming that this is going to be hinged on the left, and then you could set your width and height. So like if I could say that, I wanted this to be 1900 high or something, and then, 500 wide, you would nominate your sizes, and you can go into that product and go to the parameters tab. And what we've tried to do here is make it easy for you to nominate these hinge locations. So, I've got that at 100 mil, but you might go 96 or something to stick to that system 32 for your top and bottom hinge. And then your third and fourth and fifth hinge are all based on the distance from the bottom of the door. So just to show you this in 3D, and I'll sort of stack these side by side so you can see it a bit clearer. What you've got there is, as I add the third one in, let's say I want that to be specifically at 700 mil from the bottom. I can nominate that amount. Next one, I might want to go 1400 from the bottom. And then I've got my hinges, because refaces are pretty much based around that, where you'd just be taking a measurement based on the door that you're refacing. So, you don't typically want them to, be centered or anything like that. It's really just you're measuring it and you're wanting to say, from here to here, it's this size, just do that. And that's kind of the way we've designed these products to work. You can change for your cup hole diameter and your cup hole depth and your anchor diameter and depth. So you've got options there to make that nice and easy. And then you've also got the same option for your draw fronts. And rather than trying to make these overcomplicated, we tried to do this as just like, again, the same kind of thing that, you could specify here that you've got how far in is it from the edge. So your first reference there is saying, okay, from the edge across, how far is that? It's at 48 millimeters at the moment. Let's just make it 100 to see that clearly shift. So you can nominate what you want that to be from the left and from the right. So you've got the control either way. So you can measure that draw front that you reface in. And then your distance between your first hole. So the first hole there is how far up from the bottom of the draw to the first hole. That would be the first thing that you would measure. And, if you nominated that at 30 millimeters, for example, then that's what that is. You could also make this work on inches as well. So you could just go in there and type inches too. So, if it was 2 inches off the left and 2 inches off the right, and, maybe an inch and a half off the bottom, and then, the distance between the holes. And again, they're typically, for most of these metal-sided systems, are based on system 32, so most of those are going to be like, 32 millimeters, for example, and then 96 millimeters for the next hole. And if you don't want that option, then you can just set that to 0 and that hole will turn off, so if your draw front wasn't high enough to support the gallery, you could just turn that one off, and that's nice and easy too. And again, then whatever the diameter and the depth of those holes are, so you can go through and nominate those. But that's a pretty easy way to do reface jobs, where you can just nominate the overall size and drag and drop your products onto the order entry page. So hopefully that will sort of clarify that one for you, Matt. Let's see. You did have another question about how you could create some sample doors for certain sizes. You could use the same kind of order entry, but maybe you'd just go into your door list here, because if I wanted to say make a shaker door sample size, and again, I think you were sort of asking how that would be in inches. So I'd probably say, you said 12 by 12. So I'd go sort of 12 by 12, and then that's my sample shaker door. And then I could just go ahead and drag out, whatever other door design I wanted and nominate that. You've got then your profile options across here. So, you can go through and say, okay, what outside edge profiling tool you're nominating, or what inside edge, pocketing tool you're nominating. So you can go through and settle your tools there as well. But you can also double click on that and go into like the options here and nominate these things as well. Otherwise, you could set that for the job and have it read from the job settings. Heaps of options. You could also double click on those. You could right click and go edit properties. And then, I'm changing both of these at the same time. So if I just wanted to say, look, this was my pocketing tool, I could do that. I could nominate a pocketing tool, and then it changes across the board. So you could go through and, have as many of these as you want, and then route them out. And that way you've got, 6 or 7 sample doors that you could display for your customers. All right. So I think that has covered the questions that have come through that I can see. So if you have any other ones, let us know and I can cover them off. I'm just going to have a quick look on the Facebook group there to see if anyone has asked any other questions that we've missed as well. So it looks like I've sort of covered most of them, but yeah, as Eric said, drop your questions in. Happy to answer anything that you guys want to go through. We've got a little bit more time that I can be with you guys today to go through and cover these things. So feel free to ask away. right. Well, nothing else coming through, then we might wrap that up there. Again, happy to spend a little bit more time and answer anything that you guys want to ask, so feel free. Petitions on Gola cabinets. Yeah, Gola is like, for everyone else watching, is the US version of like what we call finger pull over here. So if I was to look at a product, let's just drag out, what we've got in our sort of standard cabinet library would be the base finger pull cabinet range. We've also got like the C channel, which is probably the closer thing to Gola because, it's based on aluminium extrusion. So if I was to go ahead and grab a product here and open this up, and let's go into the product here, you can see we've got that aluminium extrusion, which would be what is the Gola option. So I think what you're asking there, Noel, is just about, if you wanted to drop a petition in there, and then how would that interact with that Gola range? We tend to avoid doing custom parameters for various reasons. We'd like the customers to have more control over products at part level. So we tend to just leave it as custom shapes. So, what I'd probably say to do there is go into the petition, go to edit shape. And if you go to the load from library option, we do have a range in our library here called the finger pull ends. So even though they're designed like for left ends, and you got the various different sizes there, so I could grab that C finger pull left end option, and that's going to apply the cutout there for me. So that would probably be the easiest way. And as you can see, that's gone to the back because I've grabbed the left hand. So I'd actually need to grab a right hand end in that scenario. So we go back in and load from library. Probably, something to note there, Jason, we could probably, add those in as a petition option too, would be pretty useful. So just a copy of those, but you can make it work with just the right hand end. Again, a little bit confusing to know which one that you're grabbing. But if we open that up, you can see then I've got that cutout running around the petition. So that works really nicely. It's just a case of just loading up that saved part shape. And then, from there, you're just building your product out as you need it. So, if you wanted to split that and this side was going to be a set of drawers or something like that, you can go ahead and build that, and nice and easy. You've got your Gola or finger pull cutout wrapping around that rail. Yeah, that would be the way I'd probably approach that one. And you could adjust that too. Like if you needed that to run up, you could definitely adjust that, because at the moment there's nothing above it, right? So I can click on that and go adjust part, and I could go to my top edge there and maybe add that 16.5 mil that it thinks it needs to drop down by the top thickness. That way I get that spot on and running up to the right spot. So yeah, that's how I'd go about that. Can you show us how to make this panel groove that it's parametric? Is that the back? That's like probably the back of a cabinet, I guess you're asking there, like for horizontal grooving. Probably a good point there. We could certainly add in a horizontal version of like our V groove door. That would probably be a pretty good suggestion there, because if I had a look now, like if it was just to make a tall cabinet, right, for example, and let's just go into the product library and grab a tall product. I'll make that a little bit wider. Maybe you're gonna split this into sections. So if I just reset this, maybe you're gonna have a top section there that's in inches. I'm going to flick back to millimeters, more familiar, but go ahead and nominate that. Maybe that's going to be a pair of doors. And then down here, we can split that. And at the bottom, it looks like you've got, maybe a couple of drawers or another pair of doors or something. And that's a lower height section as well. And this middle section here is going to be open. Down here, obviously I can split that into a couple of drawers or something like that. That's fine. And then, you might want to go into your interior and start building that out, so you might come down here with this one, and then go ahead and make that a fixed shelf and center that, or flush that to the top of the lower section. And then same deal up here, you might go ahead and grab that and make that fixed, and then flush that to the bottom of that next opening. Might put a division and some shelves or something up there, whatever you wanted to do in those sections. But come into, what that is at the back there. If you're trying to open that up, again, you might not have an end on it. Looks like you don't in this section. There's various things you can do there to build that. But what I'm sort of getting to here is if you wanted on the back, to have a particular product, you could probably insert a door in that situation, or you could add in the lines. I mean, in this particular situation, it would just be going to toolpath, open toolpath, and deleting out, point 3 and 4, and then just having these points at wherever you wanted to start and wherever you wanted that to go, and then nominating the depth of your groove and then what you wanted the groove tool to be using as well. So you go ahead and choose the appropriate tool, and then that's your first line, and then just repeating that for as many lines as you need. So you could do that on a product like this. But I think you've raised a pretty good point that, like, if we looked at a door, if you wanted to just make that nice and easy from a vertical groove perspective, we could add that in as an option as a horizontal choice. So we'll make a note of that one and see what we can do there. Because if we have a look under the slab category, we've got the V-groove doors by quantity. So these are options where, obviously, as I choose that door design, I can choose how many grooves I want, and we could make an option for a horizontal version of that. So that way you could just drag and drop a panel in that situation too. If it wasn't like that and I had separate products, then what I could do is I could go to my base bar back panel. So I'd probably do that. I'd probably come down and grab a base panel, and I'd look at a bar back panel. And this particular one, again, we can position it wherever we like, and our elevation can be at whatever position we need it to be at. So I'm in inches again. So let me change that. It will keep messing me up. So let's go ahead and set that elevation to 800. So what I'm sort of getting at here is that now with this one, we could go ahead and choose the door style for the V groove by quantity, right? And then on the parameters, you could choose the amount of grooves that you needed. So in this case, if I go into the other folder and come down to the V groove by quantity, I've got 7 grooves there. If I made that sort of 14 grooves, then I've got adequate amount of grooves for that sort of panel. And then that would just be what you're displaying at the back there. What I'm suggesting that we do on our side would be to provide a version of that can be horizontal rather than vertical. I guess you could always sort of rotate that around, but I think it would be much simpler if we approach it and set that up. So we'll make a note of that one. Thanks for bringing that to our attention, Suki. Let's see, Lisa. So you said, how would you make these cabinets? Are they just normal cabinets with finger pull drawers and extended floor panels in between? Yeah, hard to tell. Let me have a close look at that picture that you've shared in the chat area there. Let's see. I'll just change the sharing here so you guys can maybe see that picture. Doesn't look like I can actually, but anyway, you'll see it in the chat there. So it's hard. It is pretty hard to tell. It probably does look like finger pull cabinets, but it looks like that's an inset drawer as well. With a gap above it, maybe. It is pretty hard to tell in that photo, but if I was to just take let's delete that one and take a standard finger pull cabinet. Let's see, minimize all this. Let's take a 2 drawer. Does look like it has the ends to the floor. Actually, I've got the lines coming through on that one. Anyway, so I think what's probably changed there is that this has been maybe set to a frameless inset option. So that way now the doors are inset inside of the options. So at the moment, you could do that, and then you would have to adjust your drawers, your reveals as well. Like if I wanted to shift the top down, I could go to adjust there, and then maybe take a minus value on that top one to bring that down, and then same deal here, just to sit that underneath the rail. But then that way you could get that sitting in the right sort of perspectives. It also looks like on that photo, that they've got like a solid end panel between each cabinet as well. So you might just you might draw one product and then just drag a panel out of the library to have that solid panel between each one too. So you could come down to the end panels and, you know, drag out the appropriate thickness one and drop that in between and then stack the next cabinet and do it that way. That's kind of how it looks like it's built to me, but it is pretty hard to tell from one photo. Okay, so then Adrian said, how do I make a CNC tool profile to use the 1/4" compression cutter to cut out board, e.g. cut out drawers with grain above matching? So what you're sort of saying there is that you're wanting to sort of do your drawer fronts as one drawer, but use a smaller tool, or just stack the drawer fronts on top of each other and use that particular cutter. I think that's what you're asking there. So let's take a look. Let's clear this out and maybe we'll just put a single drawer product in here. So we'll keep this fairly reasonably simple. Let's go to the base drawers and do a 3 drawer, maybe even a 2x3. And I'll go ahead and match these together. So let's go into our options here in the info and we'll grain match that. So we can grain match that there by choosing the vertical or horizontal option. And, you know, you can hit your question mark to sort of look at the various options there, because it can be a little bit confusing because it's talking about kind of which way it is on the sheet too. So when you're talking about that grain matching function, so you're like whether it's stacking that vertically or horizontally on the sheet. So when you grain match them horizontally, it'll group them horizontally along the sheet. When you say vertical, it's grouping them vertically up the sheet. So the other thing you want to do there is obviously nominate that you're using a grain material as well. So, you know, I'll just go grain 118 or something like that, right? For this particular purpose, and let's go into cut list and we'll go to that material and optimize these, and we'll open up the optimizer. And we'll get that up here. Wrong one. Oops. All right, multiple versions of that open. There we go. So from there, you know, as you go ahead and optimize that, I'm just going to set that to something and group that. So, you know, I've gone sort of shorthand grain being horizontal, but you could change that to vertical to go the other way. So I think what your question is more or less asking about what the gap is between your parts. That's really coming from the part spacing. So, you know, if you're trying to get a 1/4", you know, I'm just going to say 3 millimeters there, and I'm going to go in, I would need to have a tool set that was based on that. So if I go into my tool set options here, right, let's see, I'll make sure you guys can see that. Let's see. You guys see that tool set option okay? Yeah, cool. So what I wanted to point out here is when we go into the ATC tool sets, you know, you're probably going to want to add a tool set for this. You know, you might call it your 1/4" grain match option, right? And then whatever your tool is that you're using, so if you're using like a 1/4" compression cutter, you know, or whatever it is, then, you know, even if it's a smaller one, again, like 1/8 of an inch, to try and get that shorter again, and you're taking multiple passes at it, you know, maybe that's the go-to. But whichever one it is, you know, you need to make sure you're putting that in the right position for your tool, you know, for where that is. So, you know, if that was in position number 5, for example, then I would have to make sure that I have still got that set in position number 5 for my machine. So depending on your machine and whether or not the name or the number is valid, you know, so I don't want to go, I guess it really depends on your machine is what I'm trying to point out there. But if I've nominated that one's a cutout tool and I've got it in my tool set, then what I'm doing here is nominating that I want that particular tool set here. And then I would set my part spacing to match that, you know, so in this case, you know, if I wanted to have my part spaced at, you know, an appropriate setting, like maybe 7 mil or something like that, just a bit over that 1/4". When I run through here and optimize that out, then it's going to put these panels closer together to allow for that particular tool to do the cutout on these options. Otherwise, your only other option would be to replace them with one face and then have like single cuts between. That would be your other way to approach it. So if I was to go back to Mozaik for a second there, if I was to go back into this option here, let's say I go to the parts tab here and look at the drawer faces. So let's say I go to that top drawer face, and I might go into edit there and change my quantity to 0, turn that one off, and then maybe go to my next one. And I've got the bottom one there, so I'm going to go to the middle one here and go to edit and change that one to 0. And then I would have to go to my face value here, and I would have to adjust this bottom one up by the value of those two combined. So obviously, I could go that 271.5 plus 180. So I'll just to calculate that quickly. We'll punch that into a calculator. I can bring one up here. So let's see, we'll go 271.5 plus 180. That's 451.5 plus the gaps in between, I guess, as well. So, if I had a 2 mil gap, let's just go that I want that to be a value of 455, and I'm going to shift that up. So then I've lifted that up, right? And now I can go into my parts, click on that part and go to edit, and then edit operations. And I could go ahead and maybe flip that over and add a toolpath, open toolpath, and delete these points. And then I could add, these slices where I needed them to be, so that would be that, again, the depth would be the thickness of the part. And then I could go ahead and nominate a particular tool. So, again, I could go find that particular 1/4 inch cutter, or, again, maybe a 3 millimeter cutter if I'm trying to go for a 3 mil gap. That way I'm really keeping that as tight as I can, nominating that at the 271.5, plus maybe that half of the tool. So maybe 273, might start at -1. And then, bring that one across to the same. And again, just run that past slightly as well. So maybe 601 or something like that. And then I would do another one there, but that's really gonna slice that through. You're not going to get the visual of it looking right because you are seeing that cut through. The only way you might get that right there is if you don't go all the way through on your depth cut there. If I maybe pulled that back slightly, then it's not going through, so 0.1, of a mil difference there. So I'm leaving a tiny bit there so I can kind of see that attached to see how it would look. Look, you could approach it that way. It'd be fairly convoluted, of course, but, I think in that situation, if you really were trying to get like perfect gray match draws, then I'd probably just be doing that on a panel saw. But yeah, there is an option there if you wanted to approach it that way. Suki, your question there about Euro cargos. Can we use them on inset doors too? Yeah, good question. I can't see why not. As Jason mentioned there, so we can click in here and make those frameless inset. The only thing there would be that you would probably want to push that back from the face. So when we go to the interior and go to edit that adjustment there, and we go to the operations, we go to the scale. So you could inset that back here. At the moment, it's at 0, so it's not inset back. So you'd probably inset that back by the thickness of your door to shift that back. And then that way, that would sit further back behind the door. Just having a look there and go to high detail mode, we've still got the machining coming through onto the door face, and we've still got the machining on the sides. One thing that you'll need to make sure you probably do there is adjust in that case, those values are still going to be fixed from the front. So let's have a look at that actually, just to make sure I can correctly advise you there. If I go to the end and go to edit operations and have a look at that one there, probably easier on the right-hand end actually. So it's orientated the right way for us. So this is the front hole here. It's 37 mil back. That's what it needed to be based on the front drilling, right? So you would probably, what I'd probably say to do is make a copy of it, of the bin that you're using. So you could have one that's inset 18 mil back, but then also go into edit and, the operations, and those values there, instead of 37, add your value back as well. Add that 18 mil onto that option and do that for each of the side holes. So that way you've accommodated or accounted for that value that you're shifting everything back. So that way everything lines up. So yeah, make a copy of it. So do that in the hardware library itself. So go into libraries, hardware, and you could go to your, sorry, not hardware library, into libraries, inserts, and then go into whichever one you wanted, and then just go there and press the copy button, make a copy of it, and make that an inserted door option. Cool. All right, I think that pretty much wraps it up then for today. There's no other questions. We'll leave it there. And yeah, sorry for the inconvenience of jumping to Zoom at the last minute there, but yeah, as I mentioned, with technical difficulties on the EVMux software that we use for the streaming. So we might look at just doing this via Zoom next time, or look at various options to see what's going to be the best way. But again, thanks. Appreciate you guys taking the time to attend and ask your questions. And yeah, look, we'll do this again soon and catch you guys on the next one. Enjoy your weekend.